Uh, right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. This is as much something that I love to talk about as doing a piece of work as such. And I'm going to take you back to 2015-16 when we were involved in the restoration of a colliery banner, and the banner belonged to the Burradon and Weetslade colliery, and the village of Burradon had gone through a lot of changes since the colliery closed in 1975, and the banner had a life of its own as well. So Alex, if you move on. The banner was very important to the village, as it was to all of the communities that on the Northern Coalfield, Northumberland and Durham, and they were rallying points, and they were brought out for different events. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the reverse of the banner, and the big picture is the only original photograph of the banner that I'm going to be talking about. And this is actually being marched in the Northumberland Miners' Picnic sometime in the later 50s or early 60s. And it has a black drape on it, which usually represents that there's been a casualty in the pit during the year that the picnic refers to. It's the only picture of the original banner in a usable state. So if you move on, Alex. So it was commissioned by the Burradon and Weetslade branch of the National Union of Mine Workers in 1954. And there's an estimate that it cost around about £900. And we know it was the fourth banner that Burradon and Weetslade had. When it was in action right up until 75, when the pit closed, the banner had to have a new home, and it went into the old primary school in Burradon, which, if you can imagine, a very traditional single-story, I think it was single-story, but a very 1950s style school with beautiful building. So it stayed there, and there was a photograph of it, which I couldn't find, of the actual banner in the school, but it had to be moved when the school was demolished, and it went to the social club, Camperdown Social Club, and that's where some of the deterioration started to happen until the project was completed, and then it went back into the Burradon's new school, which is there now, the new primary school. But it was terribly damaged by the time we got involved with it. So if you just look at that image there, and bear in mind that image when you see some of the others that I'm going to show you. So if you move on, Alex. There was always a representation on a colliery banner, and for Burradon and Weetslade, it was all tied up to the new beginning after the end of World War II, with the introduction of the welfare state and the Beveridge Report. So it's the miner climbing up into a brave new world, and he's building on prosperity and happiness, health and peace, social security, a 5-day week. And then the big thing that happened in 47, 48 was the nationalisation of the collieries. So very aspirational. And if you wanted to see another banner like this, you could go to Woodhorn and have a look at the banner display up there. And there is another banner with exactly the same picture. And that's because they came out of catalogues to a large extent, and the miners could choose what their images would be to best represent them. So if you move it on, Alex. So this is where we got involved. Burradon Forum knew about the banner and knew where it was, and it was in the care of the head teacher who's standing in the background of one of those photographs. She had it in the first time I saw it. It was lodged up against her office wall, and it was in a dreadful state. So if you move on a bit. We couldn't actually unroll it when it was in the head teacher's office. There were pieces flying off it, but we got the sense that it had hardened. I think the paint had hardened on it, and that was causing some damage. But also it had some tears on it, and they'd been repaired with gaffer tape, the kind of stuff you buy in B&Q, which wasn't quite the right thing to do with it. So in 2015, the Heritage Lottery Fund agreed to cover the cost of the repairs, and at a very late stage, they also agreed to fund a replica, and also within the overall project was a range of community activities based around the restoration. So if you move on. Now, this photograph was taken on the day that we were about to pack it up to go to the restorers. And I just wanted you to see that, because that is the extreme nature of the damage that was being dealt with. And that, as I say, there were pieces dropping off it all over the place. So if you go on a bit. We were very lucky because we were working with an extremely talented team of restorers. There were 2 restorers and their teams involved, and there were 2 aspects of it. One was the paintwork, and the other was the fabric. So Jim Devenport, who you can just about see there, he is the person who was in charge of actually getting the paintwork restored. And it was his studio that we took the banner up, and it was in the depths of Northumberland, beautiful, beautiful place. And Chris Ray and Chris was the chair of Burradon Forum, and he'd driven the project to a large extent. We took the banner up in the back of the car, and were really worried that when Jim got to see it in the flesh, as it were, because he'd seen photographs of it, we were really worried that he was going to say it can't be worked on. So this was a really anxious moment. If you keep going. So he got it out, and what he's doing there is actually picking up the finest strands that he could find. He saved everything. And it was fascinating to watch the care that he took with the whole thing. So he agreed that he would do the work. So if you move on, Alex. And interestingly, I didn't know anything about banners. I know a little bit more now, but what he had to do before he could even do any work on it, he had to get it to lie flat. And I think that took about a week to get it to lie flat. So literally they just unrolled it and then walked away and left it. The atmosphere in his studio was just right to get it to lie flat. So on the bottom frame there, you can see that it had started to flatten a bit. And I think on the bottom there, you can see the gaffer tape. It's the grey parallel stripes running across the miner's legs. So if you keep going. And that was the job that he had to do first. He had to get the tape off. And he sent me these photographs after he'd done it. And it was utterly shocking, the tears in the fabric and those horrible red marks. The gaffer tape had done something very odd to the banner. And the image of the back of the miner there, when we first saw this, it just looked like a man standing with his back to us with his shirt and trousers on. But actually, when he finished restoring the whole image, you could actually see that the miner still had his work belt with all his equipment that he would have taken into the mine, and there was something tied around his trouser legs as well that you couldn't see until it had all been cleaned up. So that was amazing seeing that. So if you keep going. So Jim spent quite a while cleaning off the grease off the gaffer tape and then cleaning off the dirt off of the image. So there was he concentrated on the front image because that was where it was going to be put in the school once it had been restored. You would only see one side of it, and so he decided quite rightly that that was the image that needed to be preserved. And after he'd done that, the job got handed over to Caroline Rendell, another. She flew over from Paris to do this work, and she's well known in banner circles. She's done a lot of work at Woodhorn, so if you do go to Woodhorn, you'll see some of her other work in there. And at that point, when Caroline finally got involved, we got a call to go up and take some of the local village residents if they'd like to go up and have a look. So we had a bit of a charabanc trip up to. We didn't know what we were going to see really. So you can imagine that when we saw that, it was stunning, absolutely stunning. So it had been repainted, brightened up, and laid flat, and it almost looks like a complete piece. But if you move on to the next one, I wonder if you can guess how she did it, because I think this is a masterpiece. She had two pieces of fabric, and one of them was a piece of net, and she laid all of the pieces of the banner over the net and fixed them. And then she fixed the worst of the damage so that everything laid flat on the net and was secure on the net. And then she dyed a piece of cotton to the exact colour of the background of the banner, and she laid that. So she laid that out first, and then she laid the repaired banner over the top of it. So the ultimate effect was quite amazing. And just a little side note, that image that you can see in the background, that big painting, was a painting that Jim was working on to go in Auckland Castle in Durham, which has had a major restoration. So he was working on that while she was up there. So keep going, Alex. And there you can see how the exact colours match. That's the background there with its tassels, and what a lovely person to work with. She was superb. Okay, Alex. And yes, the conversation in the car coming back, nobody could believe what she'd done, really. So we had to leave it there, and we were very much more relieved. And I think Jim was pleased as well that it had gone so well. Okay, Alex. But there was a complication in the whole story, really, because when we were finding the people to do the job, we'd focused so much on the original banner itself, and the the whole idea was that we would actually march it in a gala, and the village were well up for this. And I was talking to Caroline one day when the project was being planned before the application had gone in, and in my in my naivety, I said to Caroline, we're going to march it in the Durham Miners Gala. And she said, oh, no, you're not, which brought me up short. And she says, you will not march that banner anywhere. It will never leave its case. Once it's repaired, it will go into a case and it'll never come out because it couldn't stand another trip out. So we had a bit of a dilemma because the village was well up for the Durham Miners Gala. So we had some emergency discussions with the lovely people at the Heritage Lottery Fund, who were totally accommodating and just said, put your budget in and then we'll see what happens. And what eventually happened was that we had a budget to make a replica, a copy banner. So if you move on, Alex. Making a replica took a bit of fettling, but again, there are experts throughout the country who do this sort of thing. And we found a lovely company in Norfolk who did it for us. And so that banner on the right there is the replica, the reverse of the replica. So you can actually see what the reverse image is there. And that is Ruskin College, Oxford. And Ruskin College had a long tradition of what we would call adult education. And it was a place that the coal board would send miners to improve their education. And it had a very high reputation among the mining communities for that sort of thing. So if you move on, Alex. On the left-hand side there, they started with a blank sheet of cotton, and they had photographs of the original, and they liaised with Jim and Caroline, and they started from scratch and painted the whole lot, which I wish I could have gone down there to see it, but they kept us going with photographs. So they were working on that, and everything was matched to the original colours of the original banner. The slight complication we had with the replica banner was that it was being done in Norfolk, and the company that was doing it was doing another banner for a Durham village, and they said to us, oh well, we'll bring them both up together, and which was fine, but we thought that we were going to get it maybe a couple of weeks beforehand. But they said, oh no, we'll bring it up the night before. So we actually got the replica banner the night before that we were going to march it in the gala. And the problem that we had was, well, we had several problems with it. I might tell you about those later on. But the main problem, we'd never marched a banner before, and we didn't quite know how to fit it together. So we ended up in Kirkdale Court in Burradon, the sheltered court there, which was headquarters for the whole project. And the night before, literally the night before we were going down to Durham, we had to work out how to fit the poles together and how to work it. And it was extremely nerve-wracking. And I think Chris has got his thumb up there, I think, because he had the weight of the world on his shoulders for that, because he had 4 coach loads of village people and children ready, lined up for 7:30 the next morning to get down to Durham. But we got there in the end. So if you go on, Alex. Yeah, so, and again. So here it is. We had relays of coach travellers. So the banner was in the first relay that left Burradon at 7:30 in the morning, and it had all the families on it because we'd done a lot of work in the school. So we had a coach load of families, and they all had instant cameras, disposable cameras for the day to record their memories of the day. And then we got out of the coach and found a space to actually put it up and get ready to march. And then another little setback, because you have to be hosted by a band, a colliery band. And Backworth, I'm sure it was Backworth, were going to be our hosts. But in the confusion, because there are so many banners at that event, it's a growing event, we lost touch with our band, and we were standing a little bit like orphans. And an Easington Colliery band took us up and said, you look a bit lost, and we said, we've lost our banner, we've lost our band. And they said, oh, get in behind us and you can walk with us. So they were lovely, and they took us through as the day went on. Okay, Alex? Again, we struggled quite a bit to get it up, but we got there in the end. So we keep going. Oh, and this is the gathering area, and it took us 4 hours to get from there to the race course, which is not a very long way. So if you keep going. So there we are in the queue. Everybody was so interested to know why a banner from the Northumberland coalfield was in the Durham Miners Gala, and they took us to their hearts, everyone. The year that was 2016. That would have been Leslie. Yeah. Yes. So everybody took us to the hearts, and we walked and walked in the parade. So if we keep going. It was just so crowded, you wouldn't believe it. And when we started, the weather was quite good. But as we went on, I think if you go on one, Alex. No, go back to that one. As we went on, the weather got more and more threatening, and because we were out of place, and because we were there for such a long time, by the time we got to the crossroads where the politicians stand in the gallery above the road, I think is it the Royal Swan Hotel, or it's where all the photographs are taken, and every band stops under the gallery, and the politicians wave at you, and the band plays a piece while the banner is stood. And when it got to our turn, Jeremy Corbyn was there. That's right. He'd gone off to make his speech because we were so late. But the band, the Easington band, struck up under the gallery. Raindrops keep falling on my head, because we were all so absolutely soaking wet, but we're having a good time. So yeah, if we go on. So they were two of the major events: getting the new banner, getting the replica, organising the march, that sort of thing. Oh, thank you, the county. Yes. Lovely. Right, so if you move on there. The original had to be installed in the primary school. So the place was identified, and on a specified date, the whole team got together, and the guys on the scaffolding there had come from Gallagher and Turner. They'd made the case for the whole thing. The case was one of the most expensive pieces of the whole event. and that's the case that it will live in now for a long, long time. So there's that is the original banner rolled up there. And one of Caroline's lovely team came across to, it had to be steam ironed before it went into the frame. And Jim had come down for the event as well. I think he was very quiet through the whole process. I think it must be a strange thing seeing something that you've worked on for such a long time coming to its new home. So if you move on. But it all got up, and then after that, the celebrations started really, and we had a big event in the school where the new banner was unveiled, and there's Jim still looking. He's still looking a bit worried there. If you move on. It was a very much anticipated event. Ian Lavery actually did the unveiling. He'd written letters of support for us at the early stages, and so the banner, there it is in its case, just on the left-hand side there, and we had the replica in the same room. So it was the only time you'll see them together at the same event, same occasion. If you move on. The replica had a life of its own, though, because unlike the original, you could play with it within reasonable bounds. And so it went on tour, and we took it to quite a few places, and people just could get up close to it. They could touch it. They could just see what the workmanship was like, how it had all come out. So on one, we took it to the Brownies. The Brownies had great fun with it because they'd worked on different projects through the course of the whole overall project. And then the bottom one there is in Kirkdale Court. It was hung up there, and we had quite a few afternoon teas, but I'll talk more about those in a minute. So if you go on. Yeah, so the replica went back into the local church of the Good Shepherd, and the idea is there that it's in the church, but if the village community ever want to have it out for events, then it's on a movable frame, so it can come out. But as I say, there were loads of things happened around during the process. And we had exhibitions. The Backworth Band adopted us. They came quite a few times to do things for us. We'd had lots of resources made. The school had run a whole programme of events for a particular year group, adopted the project for their year group. If you move on. One of the joyous parts of the whole thing, among a lot of joyous parts, Chris came along one day and said, we've got these photograph albums. Do you think you can do anything with them? And the village in the 1980s, I think it was, had asked for people's photograph albums, literally photograph albums, to become a designated village photographic archive. And I think 7 or 8 families donated their entire photograph collection of life in the village, because you have to remember the village was a very tight community. So those photograph albums were really the village life. So we arranged to have all of those photographs digitized, and the originals are still stored. But with digitized photographs, we actually made them available to the village again, because instead of them being fragile, and in photograph albums, we put them into handling books, so people could look at them and say, "Oh, there's Auntie Nellie," and "Do you remember that bike that we used to have?" That sort of thing. So just amazing photographs. The one of the group of women in the bottom there, they're actually in the pit canteen. So they are the canteen ladies who worked shifts to make sure the miners had all their meals when they came through. So we go on, Alex. And that's the pit itself. And that's the other Colliery Rows. We've got lovely stories about the Colliery Rows. Lots of stories collected. The stop sign, it was give way to trains, basically. There wasn't anything technical like a barrier. I think there was a man in a hut and a red pole. Yes, he's got the red pole in his hand there. And if you move on again, Alex. And we couldn't go without mentioning the ladies' bowling club, because the bowling club in Burradon were amazing. The ladies and the gentlemen, and they piled in quite a few stories. And again, and just a few of the streets. And again. Well, I can't finish off without talking about food, because the best ever Victoria sandwich cake is in Kirkdale Court, and these are the team that make them. And they kept us going all the way through with all the events that we did. The catering was done by the lovely catering team here, and the generosity was just wonderful. So if you move on from there. And when as the tea was being poured, then the conversation starts, and the other handling books that we had made. So people just we thought they would stay for like an hour and maybe have a chat, but in the end, they'd be there for 2.5 hours, just reminiscing, basically. But it was very powerful reminiscence of a life gone by, really. Okay. Everything was fun, yes. I knew I put that picture in for a reason, but we had a lot of support from banks, the mining people who you either love them or you hate them in Northumberland with different things they're involved with. But they came down, and one of their members of staff did a presentation about what coal was for the year sevens that were involved in the project. And he, there might be some people in the audience who might remember this, but he brought a bucket of coal into the classroom. And it was a showstopper, an absolute showstopper. And the mistake that he made was actually offering to pass it round to everyone. So all of the year sevens went home covered in coal dust because they were so fascinated by it, and they touched it, and they put it all over their faces, and they looked as though they'd been down a pit by then. But if you go on. And so at the end of it all, after all the different strands had been done, we went one better, and we had a big party, and that was a fantastic event as well. But it was a lovely fitting end to a really dream project, really. So it was, as I say, it was one of the highlights of my career, I think. And if you ever get a chance to go up to Woodhorn and see some of the banners, and then I think you might get an idea about what the fun that we had with that, and what a piece of history that we managed to salvage, all because of the commitment of the people in the village. Just absolutely amazing. So I think that's me done.